President Donald Trump received a political blow late Friday when a federal judge ruled that the impeachment process was legal. A House resolution has never, in fact, been required to begin an impeachment inquiry, Judge Beryl Howell wrote, giving the Judiciary Committee the right to review the secret grand jury evidence from Robert Mueller's investigation. Before the ruling, the president insisting that he didn't need a dedicated strategist to coordinate his impeachment message.
Okay, this is absolutely wild. Like, we're watching something happen in real time that I don't think we've ever seen before in American politics. So buckle up, because what went down in federal court yesterday is the kind of thing that legal experts are calling unprecedented, shocking, maybe even historic. And the timing, oh man, the timing on this is absolutely perfect chaos, because it's all happening at the exact same moment that new impeachment papers are being filed in Congress against President Trump. I'm not making this up. You literally cannot script this kind of drama. Here's what happened. Trump's lawyers, his own legal team, admitted in open court that they withheld documents. Documents they were legally required to turn over during discovery. Documents the other side was entitled to see. And when I say admitted, I mean they had to stand up in front of a federal judge and confess that, yeah, we didn't hand over everything we were supposed to hand over. Now, if you're not a lawyer, you might not understand just how bad that is. But trust me when I tell you, this is a massive deal. Like career-ending kind of stuff. The kind of thing that gets lawyers disbarred. The kind of thing that turns judges into fire-breathing dragons ready to rain down consequences. But before we go any further, or real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics. To bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. And that's exactly what happened. The judge, and we're talking about a federal judge here, not some small claims court referee, absolutely lost it. Well, not lost it in the sense of yelling and screaming, but in that cold, controlled judicial rage way that's somehow even scarier. The judge issued what's being called a stern final warning, and the language used was brutal. The judge said that any further attempts to withhold or conceal evidence would result in the fullest sanctions available under the law. Let me break down what that means, because those are loaded words. Fullest sanctions available under the law includes monetary fines that could be massive. We're talking tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. It includes contempt of court charges, which can mean jail time. It includes adverse jury instructions, which basically means the judge tells the jury to assume the hidden documents would have hurt Trump's case. And here's the really scary part. It includes potential criminal referrals, meaning the judge could refer Trump's lawyers to prosecutors for potential obstruction of justice charges. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's not a warning. That's a judge saying, I am done playing games with you people, and if you step out of line one more time, I'm bringing down the hammer. And reports from inside and outside the courtroom describe Trump's legal team as panicking, not concerned, not worried. Panicking. Sources are using that exact word because these lawyers know they're standing on the edge of a cliff right now. One more misstep and they're going down hard. But wait, it gets even better, or worse, depending on your perspective. At the exact same time this courtroom chaos is unfolding, new impeachment papers dropped in the House of Representatives. Fresh articles of impeachment against President Trump, filed, official, on the record. And the timing is so perfect that you have to wonder if someone coordinated this. Did House Democrats wait for this courtroom disaster?
For the first time, a member of Congress has filed articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. Representative Brad Sherman of California filed a resolution to remove Trump from office. He says Trump obstructed justice by interfering with the FBI investigation into potential Russian collusion and firing FBI Director James Comey. The White House dismissed the bill as, quote, utterly and completely ridiculous and a political game at its worst. The word impeachment has resurfaced again and again as the Trump White House has struggled with scandals.
To file their impeachment articles? Did they see an opportunity and jump on it, or is this just the most insane coincidence in political history? Either way, the optics are brutal for Trump. You've got his lawyers melting down in federal court while Congress is simultaneously moving to impeach him again. That's a two-front war. That's legal and political pressure converging at the same moment. That's the kind of scenario that keeps presidents and their advisors up at night. And legal experts are already speculating that the courtroom revelations, the admission of withheld documents could play a major role in the congressional impeachment proceedings. Because if Trump's team is hiding documents in one case, what else are they hiding? What other evidence is out there that hasn't seen the light of day? Those are the questions Democrats are already asking. Those are the questions that drive impeachment investigations. So what we're looking at here is a perfect storm of legal and political disaster for Trump. His lawyers just handed prosecutors and political opponents a gift, an admission of misconduct, an opening to argue that Trump's entire defense strategy is built on concealment and obstruction, and the judge's threat, that warning about criminal referrals, raises the stakes even higher, because now Trump's lawyers aren't just fighting to win a case. They're fighting to stay out of jail themselves. They're fighting to keep their law licenses. They're fighting for their professional lives. And when lawyers start panicking like that, when they realize they might personally face criminal consequences, that changes everything. That changes their willingness to follow aggressive defense strategies. That changes their calculation about how far they're willing to go to protect their client. And that might be exactly what this judge intended, because judges know how to apply pressure. They know how to send messages. And this judge just sent the clearest possible message. Play by the rules or face consequences that could destroy you. This story is just getting started. The courtroom drama is ongoing. The impeachment papers are filed. And we're all watching to see what happens next, because this is the kind of moment that could change everything. All right, let's dig into the details here, because there's so much happening beneath the surface that most people aren't fully grasping. First, we need to understand what it means when lawyers withhold documents during discovery. Discovery is the phase of a legal case where both sides have to share evidence with each other. It's a fundamental part of the American legal system. The idea is that trials shouldn't be about surprise or ambush. Both sides should see the evidence beforehand so they can prepare their arguments. When one side withholds documents, when they hide evidence they're legally required to share, that's a serious violation. It's not just breaking a procedural rule, it's undermining the entire justice system. It's saying we don't care about fair trials, we only care about winning. And judges take that incredibly seriously, because if they let one side get away with hiding evidence, the whole system falls apart. Nobody can trust that trials are fair. Nobody can believe in justice. So when Trump's lawyers admitted they withheld documents, they basically confessed to breaking one of the most important rules in litigation. And the judge's response reflects just how serious that violation is. Now, we don't know exactly which documents were withheld yet. The reporting on this is still developing. Details are still coming out. But whatever those documents are, they must be significant, because Trump's lawyers wouldn't risk their careers and potential jail time to hide documents that don't matter. These have to be documents that would seriously hurt Trump's case, documents that contain damaging information, documents that could change the outcome of the trial. And here's where the judge's response gets really interesting. The judge told the jury, the actual jury deciding this case, that they could assume the withheld documents would have been unfavorable to Trump. Think about what that means. The judge is basically instructing the jury to hold the document concealment against Trump, to interpret the missing evidence as evidence that hurts Trump's defense. That's called an adverse inference. And it's one of the most powerful sanctions a judge can impose. Because now Trump's team can't just hand over the documents and move on. The damage is done. The jury has been told to assume those documents are bad for Trump, even if the documents eventually come out and they're not as damaging as expected. The jury already has that negative impression planted in their minds. That's devastating for a defense strategy. That's the kind of thing that loses cases. And Trump's lawyers know it. That's why they're panicking. They just made their own client's defense significantly harder. They just handed the prosecution a massive advantage. And they did it through their own misconduct. Now let's talk about the timing with the impeachment papers, because that's where this story gets really complicated. New articles of impeachment were filed in the House on the same day as this courtroom disaster. That's not a coincidence that helps Trump. That's a convergence of problems. Democrats in Congress are now looking at Trump facing two major crises simultaneously: legal troubles in federal court, political troubles through impeachment, and they can use each one to amplify the other. Here's how that works. Democrats can point to the courtroom admission of withheld documents and say, see, this is a pattern. This is Trump and his team trying to hide evidence, trying to obstruct justice, trying to conceal the truth from the American people. And that pattern of concealment becomes part of the impeachment narrative. It becomes evidence of unfitness for office. It becomes ammunition for arguing that Trump needs to be removed. On the flip side, Republicans who might want to defend Trump now have to deal with this courtroom mess. They have to explain why Trump's lawyers were hiding documents. They have to spin this in a way that doesn't make Trump look guilty or dishonest. And that's a really hard sell, especially when a federal judge is threatening criminal referrals, especially when Trump's own lawyers admitted wrongdoing in open court. So the impeachment fight just got a lot harder for Trump's defenders. They were probably already preparing talking points about how impeachment is political persecution, about how Democrats are just trying to overturn the election, about how this is all a witch hunt. But now they have to do that while Trump's lawyers are admitting to hiding evidence in federal court. Good luck making that argument sound convincing. Now let's talk about what fullest sanctions available under the law actually means in practice, because that phrase covers a lot of ground. Monetary sanctions can range from small fines to massive penalties. Judges have discretion to impose whatever amount they think is appropriate to punish the misconduct and deter future violations. If the judge really wants to send a message, we could be talking about six-figure fines, maybe more. That might not sound like much to someone like Trump, but it adds up fast, especially if the sanctions are imposed per document or per day of delay. Those numbers can get astronomical quickly. Contempt of court is another potential sanction. Contempt can be civil or criminal. Civil contempt is about forcing compliance. Criminal contempt is about punishing past misconduct. Both can result in jail time. Now, it's unlikely that Trump himself would be jailed for his lawyers' misconduct, but the lawyers, they could absolutely face contempt charges. They could be fined. They could be jailed until they comply with court orders. And that's where the panic comes in, because lawyers who face contempt charges often lose their law licenses. They get disbarred. Their careers are over. So Trump's legal team is staring at the very real possibility of professional destruction. And that makes them unreliable. That makes them desperate. That changes how they approach the case going forward. Adverse jury instructions, which the judge already imposed, are incredibly powerful because the jury is told that they should interpret missing evidence in the way most harmful to the party that withheld it. That's a huge burden for Trump's defense to overcome. They now have to prove their case. While the jury is predisposed to believe the hidden documents were damaging, that's like playing basketball with a weight around your ankle. You can still try to play, but you're at a massive disadvantage. And then there's the criminal referral possibility. If the judge believes the document concealment rose to the level of criminal obstruction, the judge can refer the matter to federal prosecutors. Those prosecutors can then investigate. They can bring charges. They can put Trump's lawyers on trial. And if those lawyers get charged, they're going to be facing a very difficult decision. Do they keep defending Trump and risk their own freedom? Or do they start cooperating with prosecutors to save themselves? That's where things could get really interesting, because lawyers who flip, who decide to cooperate, we can provide devastating testimony. They know where all the bodies are buried. They know what Trump knew and when he knew it. They know what instructions they received and what strategies were discussed. If Trump's lawyers start cooperating with prosecutors to avoid prison time, that could be game over for Trump in multiple cases. Now, reports from people who were in and around the courtroom described the scene as chaotic. Trump's legal team was described as visibly shaken, rattled. Some reports use the word panicking to describe their demeanor. And that makes sense. These lawyers just watched a federal judge threaten them with sanctions that could end their careers and potentially put them in jail. That's terrifying. That's the kind of thing that makes people second guess every decision they've made, every strategy they've pursued, every aggressive tactic they've employed. And lawyers who are that scared make mistakes. They become more conservative. They become less effective because they're worried about their own exposure. They're worried about protecting themselves. And that means they can't fully focus on defending their client, which is exactly what Trump doesn't need right now. He needs his legal team at the top of their game. He needs them aggressive and confident. But instead, he's got a team that's terrified of the judge, that's looking over their shoulder, that's second-guessing every move. That's not a recipe for winning cases. There's also speculation that this incident could affect other cases Trump is involved in. Because judges talk to each other, word spreads in the legal community. If Trump's lawyers have been sanctioned in one case for withholding documents, judges in other cases are going to be watching them like hawks. They're going to be scrutinizing every filing. They're going to be looking for any hint of misconduct. And that increased scrutiny makes everything harder. It means Trump's legal team has to be absolutely perfect in every other case. One more mistake, one more instance of withheld documents or procedural violations, and the consequences could be even worse. Because judges have less patience for repeat offenders, they view it as a pattern rather than an isolated incident. The political implications of this are massive too, because impeachment isn't just a legal process, it's a political one. And politics is all about optics, about perception, about narrative. And the narrative right now is that Trump's legal team is in chaos, that they're panicking, that they're facing potential criminal charges for hiding evidence. That's a terrible look politically. That's ammunition for every Trump critic. That's a soundbite that will play on loop on cable news. Democrats are going to use this in campaign ads. They're going to use it in speeches on the House floor. They're going to use it to argue that Trump is unfit for office, that he surrounds himself with lawyers who break the rules, that his entire operation is corrupt. And some voters, especially independent voters who aren't firmly in either camp, are going to be swayed by that argument. They're going to look at this courtroom chaos and think, maybe there's something to these impeachment allegations. Maybe Trump really is as bad as Democrats say. That shift in public opinion could be crucial, because impeachment ultimately depends on political will, on whether enough members of Congress are willing to vote for removal. And that political will is shaped by what voters think, by polling numbers, by how loud the calls for accountability become. This courtroom disaster could be the thing that shifts public opinion just enough to make impeachment a real threat rather than just political theater. And Trump's team knows that. They understand the stakes, which is why the panic is real, which is why this moment matters so much. This isn't just about one case or one judge. This is about the entire legal and political landscape shifting against Trump at a critical moment. And once that shift starts, it's really hard to stop. Okay, so let's break down what actually happens from here, because all of this drama and chaos has to lead somewhere. First, the immediate consequences in the courtroom. Trump's lawyers now have to figure out how to salvage their case with a jury that's been instructed to assume hidden documents were damaging. That's an incredibly difficult position. Their options are limited. They can try to bring in other evidence that's so strong it overcomes the negative inference. They can try to argue that the withheld documents aren't actually that important. They can try to minimize the damage through careful cross-examination and closing arguments. But all of those strategies are uphill battles, because the judge has already told the jury what to think about the missing documents. And juries listen to judges. They respect judicial authority. So even if Trump's lawyers put on a perfect defense from this point forward, they're still fighting against that adverse inference. They're still dealing with a jury that's predisposed to view their client negatively. That's why legal experts are saying this could be a case-defining moment. This could be the thing that determines the outcome. Not the evidence itself, but the fact that evidence was hidden. Second, the potential for criminal referrals. If the judge follows through on the threat, and there's no guarantee, but it's a real possibility, then Trump's lawyers could be facing federal investigation. Prosecutors would look at whether the document concealment was intentional, whether it rose to the level of obstruction of justice, whether anyone should be charged criminally. And that investigation would put enormous pressure on Trump's legal team, because suddenly they're not just lawyers representing a client. They're potential defendants themselves. They're people who might need their own lawyers, people who might need to cut deals to protect themselves. And if any of Trump's lawyers decide to cooperate with prosecutors, if they decide to provide information about what Trump knew and what he directed, that's a nightmare scenario for Trump. Because lawyer testimony is powerful. Lawyers are considered credible witnesses. They take notes. They keep records. They can provide detailed accounts of conversations and strategies. If prosecutors get a cooperating lawyer from Trump's team, they get access to all of that information, and that could open up new lines of investigation, new cases, new charges. Third, the political fallout from the impeachment filing. Congress now has to decide what to do with these new articles of impeachment. Do they move forward with hearings? Do they bring witnesses? Do they subpoena documents? Or do they table the whole thing and focus on other priorities? That decision is going to be shaped by how this courtroom situation develops. If more damaging information comes out, if we learn what was in those withheld documents, that could push Democrats to move more aggressively on impeachment. It could give them the ammunition they need to convince moderate members that this is serious, that this isn't just political theater. On the other hand, if nothing else develops, if this courtroom incident is the peak of the drama, then Democrats might decide the political cost of impeachment isn't worth it. They might decide to focus on winning elections rather than removing Trump through congressional action. But either way, Trump is now fighting on multiple fronts. He's got the courtroom battle, he's got the impeachment threat, and he's got the 2026 midterms approaching, which means every bit of negative news affects his party's electoral prospects. That's a lot of pressure converging at once. Fourth, the impact on Trump's other legal cases. He's involved in multiple investigations and lawsuits, some federal, some state, some civil, some criminal. And what happens in one case affects the others. If judges in other cases hear about Trump's lawyers withholding documents and facing sanctions, they're going to be less patient with any procedural issues going forward. They're going to scrutinize Trump's legal filings more carefully. They're going to be quicker to impose penalties for any violations. That means Trump's legal team has to be absolutely perfect in every other case. They can't afford another misstep. They can't afford to give any judge any reason to question their conduct. And that level of scrutiny, that constant pressure to be perfect, is exhausting. It's the kind of thing that leads to mistakes. Because when you're worried about not making mistakes, you sometimes make mistakes. When you're overly cautious, you miss opportunities. When you're scared of the judge, you're not as effective an advocate. So this courtroom disaster could have ripple effects across all of Trump's legal problems. It could make everything harder, everything more complicated, everything more dangerous. Fifth, the question of who knew what and when. At some point, investigators are going to ask, did Trump know his lawyers were withholding documents? Did he direct them to do it? Or did his legal team make that decision on their own? Those questions matter because they determine Trump's level of culpability. If Trump directed the concealment, that's much worse. That could be obstruction of justice. That could be a crime. If the lawyers did it without Trump's knowledge, that's still bad for his case, but it doesn't directly implicate him in wrongdoing. We don't have answers to those questions yet. But you can bet prosecutors and congressional investigators are going to dig into them. They're going to interview people. They're going to review communications. They're going to try to figure out the chain of command. And depending on what they find, this could get much worse for Trump, or it could be contained to his legal team. Sixth, the public perception battle, because in politics, optics matter as much as facts. And the optics here are terrible for Trump. You've got headlines screaming about lawyers panicking, about judges threatening criminal referrals, about documents being hidden, about chaos in the courtroom. That's not the image of a president in control. That's not the image of someone who has nothing to hide. That's the image of a person in trouble, of a legal strategy falling apart, of a team in crisis. And voters see that. They read those headlines, they watch the news coverage, they form opinions. Now, Trump's base probably won't care. They've stuck with him through everything else. They'll stick with him through this. They'll say the judge is biased. The system is rigged. The whole thing is a witch hunt. But independent voters, swing voters, people who aren't fully committed to either side, they might start to waver. They might start to think where there's smoke, there's fire. If Trump's lawyers are hiding documents, maybe there's something to hide. That shift in perception, even if it's just at the margins, could be significant, could affect elections, could change political calculations in Congress, could make impeachment more viable. Seventh, what Trump himself does in response, because he's not going to stay quiet about this. He's going to tweet or post on social media. He's going to give statements. He's going to attack the judge, attack the system, attack his political enemies. That's what he always does. That's his pattern. But those attacks could backfire because judges don't like being attacked. And when Trump publicly criticizes judges, it sometimes makes them more determined to rule against him. It hardens their resolve. It makes them less sympathetic to any arguments his lawyers make. So Trump's response, his public statements about this courtroom disaster, right, could actually make things worse, could antagonize the judge even more, could lead to harsher sanctions. But Trump probably can't help himself. It's not in his nature to stay quiet. It's not in his nature to let perceived attacks go unanswered. So we're probably going to see him lash out. And that's going to create another round of controversy, another news cycle of negative coverage, another opportunity for his opponents to criticize him. Eighth, the long-term implications for presidential accountability, because what we're watching here is a president facing serious legal consequences while in office. That's historically rare. Presidents usually have protections, immunities, ways to delay or avoid legal proceedings, but those protections are eroding. Courts are becoming less deferential to presidential power. Judges are more willing to hold presidents accountable. And this case, with its threats of sanctions and criminal referrals, is part of that trend. It's part of a broader shift toward treating presidents more like ordinary citizens when they're accused of wrongdoing. Some people think that's good, that presidents shouldn't be above the law, that accountability is essential to democracy. Others think it's dangerous, that it politicizes the justice system, that it makes it harder for presidents to govern. Both perspectives have merit. But regardless of where you stand, we're living through a moment when these questions are being answered in real time, when precedents are being set, when the balance between presidential power and legal accountability is being recalibrated, and Trump is at the center of it all. He's the test case, the example everyone will point to for years to come. So where does this leave us? With a president whose lawyers just admitted to hiding documents in federal court, with a judge threatening serious sanctions, including possible criminal referrals, with new impeachment papers filed in Congress, with panic spreading through Trump's legal team, with political and legal crises converging, with uncertainty about what happens next. This story is still developing. New information is coming out, investigations are ongoing, court proceedings continue, and we're going to be following every single development, because this is the kind of moment that could change everything. And that could define a presidency, that could reshape how we think about power and accountability. Stay tuned. This is far from over. It's probably just beginning.